Welcome to the very first SmåBUS Children's Book Festival. My name is Joke Gunt. I have the honor of being the project leader of SmåBUS 2018. 2 years ago, it all started with only one small, silly idea. The idea was bringing children's book writers and illustrators to Småland, giving them the opportunity to be inspired by Astrid Lindgren's villages and woods and books and stories, of course. To be inspired by each other, to be away from the rat race at home. And here we are. Look around you, meet colleagues from other countries than yours. Find out what they have to say, enjoy each other's differences, and I hope it will be fun. Welcome. Thanks. And I'm so very pleased to have the chance to introduce to you our very first ever SmåBUS speaker. She's an award-winning writer for young adults. Her books have been published in 19 countries. In 2017, she was the Hay Festival International Fellow, spending the year meeting and learning from teenagers all over the world. She works to empower and give a voice to young people. And she's not only a brilliant writer, but also a wonderful person. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jenny Valentine.
Thank you. This is working, right? I feel like I'm going to do a burger order or something. But can I sit down? Yes. Because I'm quite small, so I hope I don't disappear. Can I still sit down? Is that all right? Thank you. We have a game. I play a game with young people. It's called Well Bragged, and that little moment there, slightly left well bragged. Interestingly enough, boys are way better at it than girls. And you just you sit in a circle, you sit in a group, and you say something that you're really good at. Like, I'm really good at writing books for young adults, and everyone has to go well bragged. And it's really extraordinary how uncomfortable people feel about doing that when they start. But they pretty much soon enough get the hang of it. Boys, yeah, true, boys are pretty good at it straight off. I am going to tell you a story to start with, given that this is, what is it? Narrative power and the joy of reading. I'm going to tell you a story. And then after I've told you the story, we're going to talk about what just happened. I live in quite a remote place in Wales. It's a village green. I live in a really, really old house. It's the second oldest house in the village. Parts of it are, I can't add up, about 600 years old. And my friends live in a converted chapel across the green, which was probably built in the late 18th century. And we have a nice community there. It's very quiet. It's very there's not many people. There's a lot of sheep, and there's not many people. We don't lock our houses particularly. We don't lock our cars. It's really nice. I was at home in the evening, and my friends who live in the chapel are called Graham and Matthew, and they're artists. And Graham has a 21-year-old son called Arnie. And Graham and Matthew do Airbnb, like most people who live in interesting houses these days. They have Airbnb guests. And they were out, and when you go out for supper where I live, you go up some hillside, up some track, and your phone doesn't work, and no one can get hold of you. So if there's an emergency, God forbid. They were out. Arnie phoned me. I can't get the guests in. I can't open the door. I can't get into the church. The guests have arrived. The paying guests have arrived, and I can't get into the church. 25 years ago, I worked in a whole food shop in London. I worked in a whole food shop for years, actually. It's the only other thing I know how to do. Well bragged. And actually working in a shop is such a useful job when you're a writer. Because,
Can you repeat, what kind of shop was it?
I think it's called Bioladen, is that right? No, it's like a deli, like a organic. It's no, it's completely fine. It's like it doesn't actually matter what shop you work in. The fact is that you don't really exist, and the person wants the thing behind you. You know, so you kind of get to watch and not be noticed, which I think is an exceptional piece of training for a writer anyway. But in this shop, 25 years ago, at least 25 years ago, we used to reuse plastic bags. So customers would bring in their bags. Bear with me, the story is going to make sense. Customers would bring in their bags, and we would kind of make sure that they were clean and fold them up and then give them back to other customers to use, obviously, doing our small part. And one of my super glamorous jobs was to check what was in these bags. And I found used nappy in one, actually, like a diaper, a used one. Didn't use that bag. I found a negative of a photograph, which actually became the beginning or the kind of pivotal point of the plot of my second book. So, it's quite useful. And I found a key in a bag in a Whole Foods shop in London 25 years ago. It's like that. And I thought, who the hell loses a key that size anyway? And what was it for? What was the key for? Right, you're all writers and illustrators, you know what the key's for now, don't you? So, Arnie's in my kitchen, and actually the Airbnb guests are now in my kitchen too, because what are we going to do with them? And they're drinking tea, and they've been to a wedding, and they really don't want to be in my kitchen at all. And I said, and the key was hanging on the wall, and I said, oh, maybe we'll try this key. I found it 25 years ago. Maybe it's going to work. I mean, there can't have been that many locksmiths back in the day. And the key worked. Yes, it did. It worked. And they're always losing their bloody keys. They're always borrowing my key now. But yeah, it worked. So that was the magical resolution to my story. Okay, so what did I do in that story? I set you a scene. I introduced you to some people. I gave you a problem. I did a bit of digression. And then I gave you resolution. But what did you do when I was telling that story? Every single one of you has a different version of that story to the one that I just told. Hello?
I remember my own Violin.
Did you own one too? I do actually love you. We only met yesterday, and after about 5 minutes, I was like, I think I love you. Yeah, maybe. Everybody, each and every single one of us has a different version of that story. You don't know what my friends look like. You don't know what my house looks like. You don't know what the chapel looks like. You don't know what the queue looks like. But all of you do now know in your own version. This is the magic of reading. This is it. And I have two, well, they're grown up now-ish, daughters who don't read, who never read. And they read when they were little, when I was in charge. But I didn't realise there were children in the world who didn't read before I met my own kids. Talk about life sending you what you need to know. And I feel really strongly about the fact that this is an extraordinarily important activity for all of us. It continues to be throughout life, but especially when we're growing, when we're learning. I mean, I don't know. I'm still learning, actually. I don't want to patronise young people by saying they're learning and we're not. We know the answers. More of that in a minute. But actually, that is the difference for me. I always used to say to my children, you know what? If you're getting narrative somewhere, it's fine. You know, you can watch Netflix, you can do whatever, but it's not the same. I love movies, I'm a proper movie buff, but it's not the same because all of those decisions have been made for me. How stuff looks or how people respond or, you know, it's a bit like when you're conducting a relationship via text message, you have to make so much of that stuff up for yourself. It's kind of the same thing. It's such an active pastime it's such an activity. We're not just receiving information and then, I don't know, sitting on a beanbag. We're working constantly. I haven't really written a book in the last year, partly because I'm lazy. This is not a well-bragged moment at all. Partly because I'm really lazy, partly because now and again, it's happened to me twice now, every now and again, life likes to just really screw me over and like spoil my routine so I don't get too relaxed. And the other reason I didn't really write a book this year, it's 2 years late, my book, was that I became the fellow for the Hay Festival. It's international fellow. It sounds really, really swanky, and it actually is the most extraordinary experience. But it's open to writers who live in Wales who bother to apply. So I think it was like me and 4 other people. So it's not like a huge deal. But it is what you make of it, much like reading a book. So when I first got the fellowship, I was a bit confused about what it actually meant. And I kept trying to ask people, what am I supposed to be doing? And nobody really knew. And then I realised it was actually whatever I wanted to do, whatever I wanted to make of it, I could. And because I didn't have a book, and also because I sort of have a slight resistance to being wheeled out and talking at teenagers while they get told to be quiet. And also because I remember so distinctly being a teenager and feeling like adults just wanted to tell me how the world worked and didn't want to ask me my opinion. And I was very opinionated, as you probably already will have gathered. I decided that I wasn't going to go, and I went to Spain, I went to Mexico, I went to Colombia, I went to Peru, I went to Denmark, and I travelled in the UK as well. And I didn't want to go to all of these places and say the same thing and do the hi, this is me, I wrote this book, buy it, bye. You know, I didn't want to do that. Which is a very cynical version of what I do, by the way, but anyway. I wanted to meet young people and give them the opportunity to speak to me. Or actually, I wanted to listen to what they had to say. I wanted to learn something, because one of the questions I'm always asking myself as I get older is how do I know what young people want to read about? If assuming they want to read still, you know, that's another thing. But I travelled to all of these different places and I asked really simple questions. What does the world look like to you? What do you care about? What's important? And it was a fascinating year. It's extraordinary how much in common young people from very, very different places have. Their concerns and their idealism, I suppose. And it was also really extraordinary just how happy they were to speak, to be able to tell me what their world is like, to be able to help me build the picture. I'm trying to write a book now. And in fact, this week when you see me, sometimes I'll be editing. It's all got to be done by the end of the month, which Christine said to me in the car, said it's the end of the week. Is it the end of the week? End of next week? I am very passionate about making sure that people still, I am concerned about the future of reading. I am concerned about the future of reading for young people. And I'm very concerned about what reading means. As a child, I read because I was unhappy. Because I read because my brother, who is a perfectly normal human being now, was an absolute monster when I was a kid. You laugh, but actually, guys, yeah. He used to hold me by the ankles and put my head in the loo and flash. It's like waterboarding, right? Yeah, it's a monster, Jochen. It's a monster. And he's like, oh, I was bored. It's like, really? Read a book. So I would shut myself in my room and put the chair under the door and read and not be me, not have my life, not have my problems, have someone else's, maybe, you know, occupy a completely different world, forget mine. And people talk about reading as a kind of escape. And I don't think escape is lazy. I think escape is an extraordinary superpower, actually. Because you're not just running away. It's not the same as running away. You escape, but you escape into someone else's experience. And you learn. The thing that I learned, the thing that is the most important thing that I have, is empathy. That's it. And I learned that by reading. Now, I wanted to be a writer from the age of 9. I knew I was going to be a writer in that well-bragged kind of way. But I didn't say that out loud. I was just like, yeah, I'll do that one day. And I was 34 before I wrote my first book. So 25 years of, I don't know what I was doing, something else. Reading, actually, mainly, which is the most extraordinary training, as we all know, for being able to write a story. And that escape is so important for whatever situation you might be in, whatever age you are. And I feel that, do you think every generation thinks that the next generation is under more stress than they were? Or do you think that's just us now? What do you think? I feel like my kids' generations, oh, by the way, yes, please talk to me, because I'll run out of steam at some point and just go like, uh-huh. So if this could be a conversation, I'd be more than delighted. I feel that there's an extraordinary amount of stress on young people to, well, kind of be perfect, you know, in this sort of strange public platform revolution that we're undergoing. And also just to kind of, and there don't seem to be any moorings. We're surrounded by fake truths. We're surrounded by, I don't know, teenagers spoke to me a lot about this kind of fracturing of their, affluent teenagers spoke to me a lot about this, I have to get that out. Affluent, comfortable teenagers spoke to me a lot about the fragmenting of their lives so that their real life is a bit shit, you know, like everyone's. And then their public life is, look at me at the Eiffel Tower being amazing, and, you know, all of that. I spent time with kids in Colombia. I was in a room with about 200 kids, 5 of whom had a phone. So they had very different priorities. And I hadn't been in a room with that many teenagers without a phone for a long time. It was amazing. I feel that the ability to empathize, the ability to have vicarious experience, the ability to understand difference is the most important thing that reading does for us. And I come back to the beginning about the fact that reading is so active, because you don't learn that stuff if you just sit there and take in the pictures. You don't. It's a proven neurological development that it teaches you empathy. And in this current, I don't know, we've been talking already, we've been having a really nice time already, but we already have, you know, hit the elections here, and Brexit, where I come from, and Trump, who would be hilarious if he wasn't so goddamn frightening. This, you know, this idea that difference is suddenly not tolerated or, you know, excluded, or I just feel really passionate about the fact that we need this more than ever, this idea of embracing difference. And because I'm an old-fashioned person who still likes to read a book, I don't even have a Kindle, just about managed to read the newspaper on my phone. I don't know what to do about keeping young people engaged with reading, other than to make the best possible work that we can make. Because if it's good, people will want it. And it's not really a conversation about modern technology or books are books. Books are beautiful things. I've said to my children, and I've said to other children, if I was growing up now, and I'm a person who literally read, like, obsessively, I'm not even sure that I would read that much. Because there's so much constantly asking for your attention. But the problem is, it's like a diet of sweets, you know? It's kind of, yeah, it looks great, but makes you feel a bit rubbish after a while. It's not really helping. So I know we've got a room full or a school full in the next few days of writers and illustrators and librarians and teachers, and we must be able to have a conversation about how we explain, without telling children how the world works, without telling them this is look shush, this is what I know, how we get them to understand that reading is vital, not just a kind of tick box of, yeah, I read books, I'm that kind of person, but that it helps us develop into people with really big hearts and really big minds. I'm not really much of an idealist at all, am I? But then that's why I do what I do. Does anyone have? Yes, hello.
Yeah, hi, I'm an illustrator and I have 5 children.
Okay.
I live in a house full of books.
Well bragged.
Yeah, really have, in every room there are books and
Yeah.
children don't read. They refuse to read.
Is it because books are your thing? That's what I think.
I think so, but I try to explain, and now my eldest, who is 13, she's starting to read, so I'm like,
Yeah, do that quietly. Don't let her see you do that.
Yeah, and what she reads is not what I would read, but
Okay.
she reads, so I'm happy, and I try to explain, and yesterday, before I left, she was like, Mom, when I go to the library, I have to pay for the books. I'm like, no, you don't have to pay for the books. I will pay for the car. No, take everything. Okay, yeah, I think I will do that. And I think I felt, because I have 5 children, I'm not able to put them into music and sports and all that stuff. So and all their friends are doing every day, they're doing an activity, but they are so tired, and my kids are pretty much lazy, like me a bit. But I felt guilty of not offering them. But then I enrolled them last year into drawing, because they like to draw like me, but and kind of theater, and they did it for a year, and then they were like, yeah, Mom, we don't really have to have this. We can just do nothing as well. And I was like, okay, if you do nothing, just read a book then.
Yeah. Can I just say, I don't think you're lazy at all. I had, my kids are 21 and 18 now, but they never went to a club. And it's not because I was lazy, it's because I was like, kids need freedom, my God.
Yeah.
We spend our whole time, as you get older, obviously you have duties and things that need to be done, and kids have school, is that not enough?
Yeah.
And homework, is that not enough? And then they have to go to Chinese club or, acrobatics. Why can't they just roll around in the garden and speak their own language, which is what my kids did?
Yeah.
So you're not lazy at all.
Yeah.
You're principled.
You see what you just mentioned, the stress level of children is really much higher, I think, because what I did when I had a Pippi Langkous long stocking childhood. I just went out and played, and if I got bored,
Lifted up horses, that kind of thing.
Yeah. my makeup was already. But and that's what I wanted for my kids as well. Just go out, play, or read, or do not, But they said, yeah, my friend, I can't meet with her today because she's doing this and that, and tomorrow she's doing this. And I think the stress level of certain children are really much higher, and sometimes they're tired and then all the Instagram things are going on as well. I think the stress level is indeed a bit higher.
Well, it's interesting to consider how much of that stress comes from outside the child themselves. How much of that performance anxiety comes from your parents or your peers or your teachers, or it's worth considering, I think. I was going to say something I completely forgot. I'm sure it was really interesting, but I forgot what it was.
I think that the big difference now is that, like 50 years ago, you compare yourself to the rest of the village, which made it possible for everyone to be good at something. But now when you compare yourself to the rest of the world, there's always going to be so many people who are better than you. And you get to see this all the time. So you always sort of have to fight to stay on top of things. you never get to relax.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because we're comparing ourselves, or people are comparing themselves to the rest of the world, but are they? They're comparing themselves to a false ideal, and they're looking in a certain direction. I mean, we could also be comparing ourselves to children that are struggling to educate themselves in Syria, for example. But we're not doing that and saying, I'm so fortunate, what can I do to help? We're going, oh, the thigh gap. You know, this. My daughter has this really great post that says, consider the poverty gap, not the thigh gap, which I really like. But yeah, of course we have a wider view, but it's also extraordinarily narrow at the same time. It doesn't make much sense, but that's the reality that we're up against. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, for a second, I mean, this is a I don't want to call this a conference because it's too much fun already, but this is a party about reading and writing and illustrating, and I'm not suggesting for a second that books are the only place that young people learn empathy, but they are a very serious place where that happens. And I feel that that's really, really important.
But I think it's interesting that many people in the older generation think that teenagers are lazy.
Oh.
I think that's ridiculous because they have much more going on than we did.
You know, it's an extraordinary shorthand, and I honestly, I've worked with teenagers a lot this year, and I was never I'm not, you know, I wish my kids were here, they could roll their eyes at me and do the thing, you know. I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent, I did my best, we all do our best, but I did listen to them, and I do think that there's a kind of weird shorthand that people have with their children. Like, the amount of people I see banging on about how much screen time their kids have, and they're on their phones all the time, you know? What, one rule for you, one rule for what? What's that about? Or the kind of shorthand where somebody will go, you know that thing where people talk about their child in the third person when their child's right there? What's that about? Like, imagine if you did that about your partner or your best friend. They'd be like, what are you doing? I'm right here. It's a kind of a weird hierarchy thing where we underestimate children, and it's to make us feel better about ourselves. And so we're afraid of, you know, we're afraid of groups of teenage boys. So we actually, you know, so we pretend or we say out loud enough times that they're threatening. Well, they're not. What if they're threatened by our attitudes? You know, there's so much lazy shorthand that goes on about teenagers. I wrote a piece for the Observer in the last year. It was the Hay Festival. Do you know what the Hay Festival is? It's a big literary festival in. There's the main one, their mothership, as I like to call it, because it's enormous. It's near where I live in Wales, and then they work across the world as well. So I travelled with them to all of these different places. But it was the 30th anniversary of the Hay Festival, and it was the 500th anniversary of the referendum of the Church with Martin Luther. So 30 writers were asked to do reformations of concepts and institutions, and I got adolescents. I chose adolescents because I wanted to have a conversation about exactly that. What is it, and why do we talk about it the way we talk about it, and why do we suddenly mistrust, and do we not understand that it's by its very nature it's rebellion? It is a reformation. Your kids are supposed to not like books because that you do, and then they're supposed to come back to them because they chose to. You know that we all remember that feeling, right? Of feeling like we've discovered the world for ourselves, because that's the job. That's what you're supposed to be allowed to do. And so I get, as you can tell, quite bossy about the whole don't underestimate, especially young adults, especially teenagers, because it's an extraordinarily powerful time. And the books that I read, that's the other thing, the books that I read when I was 17, I still read some of them now. Franny and Zooey I read every year just to remind me. The books that made me who I was, or who I am, still am, or made me think the way I think about things. And I already kind of had an innate respect for young people and an innate understanding that there's not enough of that about. But after this year, just the level of wisdom, political engagement, social understanding, idealism, hatred of injustice, generosity, just unbelievable. We should just sack all of the politicians now and give the jobs to teenagers, and it would be chaos, but it would be kind of fun. Weirdly, the most disturbing teenagers I met were in Denmark. Because they were like, life's perfect, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. And I was going, really?
Could you tell something about your new book and your struggle?
Oh, okay. Do you want it? All right. Do you want the real version or the like slightly easier to hear version?
Just start with the
okay. So I was on quite a roll for a while there, and then I got sick. So then there was a 5-year gap between Castile Road Night and Five Colour One. There was a 5-year gap because I had cancer, and also really seriously, I am really lazy, so I kind of took it upon myself to lie around doing naff all for quite a while afterwards. And then I got better, and Five Colour One was published. And then my editor said, and my editor's such a darling, and she really is brilliant at her job, and she really wants me to be rich. She really wants me to make some goddamn money. And so she's like, write a love story. Just write a love story. And I said, I hate them. They make me want to throw up. And she went, well, write a love story that doesn't make you want to throw up then. So I thought, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. I'll try. And then my husband left me. And then I was like, oh, fuck. How am I supposed to write about love now? I hate love. I hate everyone. And so I kind of tried for about a year to continue to write this love story, like almost spitting into a bucket every time I said something romantic. Which didn't go well, you can imagine. And then I got over my husband leaving me. Thought, oh, I'm quite free, quite like that, it's quite interesting. Went travelling for a year with the festival, talked to loads of teenagers, came back, and have managed, I think, to write a love story that doesn't make me feel sick. Just about. And I'm editing it now. And it should be out, but it might be out next year, but it might be out the year after. Because my darling editor wants me to make money, she's like, we're going to rejacket everything, we're going to re-release everything, we're going to make this money. So it might take a while. And then I promise her, as every time I promise her, I go, I'll start another one now, I promise, we'll have another one in a year. And she just kind of goes, yeah, yada, yada, yada. What else is going to happen to you? I thought, well, nothing else can, actually. That's it, I'm done now, surely. Just going to have a nice time. See, you got the true version. The unreal version is, oh, I know, it's very hard being a writer. Which we all know is rubbish.
Like your honesty.
Yeah, I've always been known for my embarrassing honesty. Well bragged. That shut you up, didn't it? I'm interested as well in the growing. I met some teenagers in Brazil. They were unbelievable people. They were this segundistas. Do you know who they are? The government in Brazil is like super corrupt, like just ridiculous. And they were trying to push through these educational reforms, which were basically just about saving money, about consolidating schools, about taking schools out of areas that really needed them, about, it's just rubbish. And nothing was being done about it via the usual channels. I mean, the teachers kind of made a bit of a fuss, but nobody listened to them. And that's kind of how that works in Brazil, because nobody has any political clout apart from the people with the money. So the students occupied their high schools for months, and they suffered police brutality, and they really were heroic. I've been doing a lot of research this year about the teenagers from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, about the anti-gun movement in America, teenagers who were really standing up and trying to change their world. I've got a fascinating story about one of those kids, I'll tell you in a minute. But these secondistas occupied their schools. They have recordings of the Prime Minister in conference in his office talking about how to discredit them. They're like 16 years old, you know, it's just... Anyway, these kids, they won major popular support, and they won some concessions, and they are super proud, super empowered, amazing people, because they actually did something, and they made a change, and they made something happen. And they made this piece of theatre about their experience, and I went to see it. It was all in Portuguese, and I'm English, remember, so I only speak English. That's how that works, I'm afraid. And I can just about understand Spanish, but Portuguese sounds like Spanish through a blender to me, so... But I understood the play completely, because it was about movement and music and emotion as much as it was about the words. And I met them before I saw the performance, and we had a conversation. And they are very, very passionate about this word protagonism, which is a massive stone in the water for us, white middle class people who write books for children, I think. Because it's all about being able to testify to your own experience. It's all about reclaiming what belongs to you and not allowing the powers that be to co-opt it for their own, their own glory or their own creative nourishment or their own success. It's really problematic, and it's really, really interesting. There's a brilliant, brilliant book in the UK called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, which is about a similar thing. It's about being able to, as people of privilege, to acknowledge the privilege that you've been given is based on an unfair playing field, an unfair system. And to rectify that, you have to actively allow fields such as literature and the arts to be more representative of your culture, not just your culture, of multiculturalism, which is, and it's really fascinating. And the conversation I had in Brazil with the teenagers there was really interesting, because they would have been absolutely furious if someone else had told their story. It was theirs to tell. This is what they said, it's ours to tell. And I was saying, well, where does fiction stand now then? If I want to write a book about the refugee experience, am I not allowed to do that anymore? And I kind of understand why I might not be, actually. But and I don't know the answer to this question. It's just a question that I'm constantly asking myself, because Remy Edo-Lodge, the woman that wrote Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, and by the way, all she does now is talk to white people about race, because obviously that's... but she no longer takes care of their guilt for them, she said. But she said she grew up reading Harry Potter and, you know, Narnia and all this shit, and she just never questioned, as a young British black woman, why everybody was white. Just was. And this idea extends beyond skin colour, it extends beyond culture. It's about experience. And these teenagers were really powerful. The story I wanted to tell you about the boy whose name I've forgotten, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. He was one of the survivors of the shooting, and he was one of the really vocal, active, super intelligent kids who were really standing up to the politicians that were taking money from the gun lobby, and two major right-wing broadcasters slanted him, basically. One said something so unspeakably violent and disgusting, I'm not going to tell you what it is. And another one, a woman, said that he was moaning because he didn't get into his colleges of choice or something ridiculous like that. And he did the smartest thing, because he didn't ask for an apology. He didn't, he didn't stamp up and down and whine and say this is unfair. He went to their sponsors, because he knows how the world works. Because he's this young, savvy kid. And he said, you're not going to sponsor this person. You're not going to represent this kind of attitude, are you? And in both cases, sponsors pulled out, the people were suspended. I think one of them may even have lost his job. And it was just such a testament to how brilliantly young people know how to navigate the world that we're still just kind of struggling to keep up with and understand. And if we're writing for young people, we have to be so aware we can't be telling them how stuff works. We have to be asking them how stuff works, actually. To be good? Yeah?
You tell them to be silent, be listening to you, and not have any ideas of their own.
Yeah, that's not being good, that's just being tidy, right?
But I always tell my children, told them when they were small, you can be naughty, you could be doing really bad stuff, but if you get caught, you get punished. Really. I mean, you're allowed to. You can try out. But I just wanted to teach them that maybe they should be good, but they have to find out their own way.
The thing that I've learned about children through my own experience is that they learn actually by osmosis. They don't learn.
Well,
if you say to a child, I don't know, don't do this. Don't speak badly to people. You know, if you can't say something nice, don't speak at all. That, you know, if you say that, they go, yeah, right. If you do that, they see it, and then that's how people learn. And I think that's how all people learn. Actually, you demonstrate good behaviour. What is it? The golden rule of writing: you show, you don't tell. There you go. Well, it works for life too.
Well, yeah, but then they were telling their teacher, "Mommy told me I can do that." So I had to go to the teacher. I was just trying. I'm always trying, but in the end, all went well.
Yeah, because they're okay. Because the thing is that the things we really learn are the things we learn ourselves, right?
But it's just that all the things you were telling is just like, I think they have parents or an environment, and not telling them just to be good and silent, or maybe they were told too much to be good and silent, and they didn't want to be anymore. But if you keep them small, they will never react. Oh, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and those are the children whose parents are actually even bothering to say something. You know, I mean, actually, those are fortunate children in one way, because I've met and worked with a lot of young people who have no guidance, who are on their own, and have been on their own for a very young age. And I've worked with young people with mental health issues, and that's another very difficult and tender and delicate place.
When they ask me questions, I always try not to give an answer, but be really difficult. I ask, what would you do? Or what? Well, that's it.
Yeah.
She wants to ask you something.
Actually, I wanted to reply to what you said. Like, how can we write books for young people and we shouldn't be telling them what to do?
Okay.
I was thinking about the American psychologist Bill Plotkin, who has drawn up a map of human development that I find extraordinarily interesting. And he says that adolescence is actually a very recent phenomenon. And if we look at the history of humankind, children were children and then they were supposed to be adults because they got married. There was no room for adolescence in our development. And it's been 200 years maximum? 150, 100 perhaps, that we've actually allowed, or that we've had a luxury because we live longer, to have children develop into adolescence and from adolescence into adults. And it's a phase that we as humankind are not ready with yet to really fully understand and grasp the richness of it, which of course provides us as writers of children's books, and children also haven't had a lot of rights over the centuries, and especially adolescent books, which provides us with an enormous challenge, an enormous richness to help and this age group develop into true adults. And one of the things that we're facing, which you have also touched upon, is that what Plotkin says is that a lot of the adults right now actually are not adults in the real sense. And someone like our good friend Trump is the the poster boy for that. A lot of adults today are pathological adolescents. Who have not grown up, truly not grown up. And now we see adolescents growing up, developing skills that are actually more mature, that are actually more adult than the adults surrounding them.
Yeah.
And then we're wondering, as writers of children's books and adolescents' books, why people aren't really liking us sometimes. But we're siding with the generation that has understood and that is growing beyond us in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. What's his name? Bill
Plotkin.
Plotkin.
I'll
look him up.
give you the reference.
I kind of wish he'd done this lecture now. There is some evidence of people in the UK. I was researching adolescents. There's some evidence of kind of in the Industrial Revolution, gangs of youths wandering around and kind of wearing a uniform and people being a bit intimidated by them. But yes, generally people went from childhood through some kind of ritual, which for boys was extremely violent and ended in, responsibility for fighting, and for girls was sexual servitude, basically, motherhood. So adolescence, you're right, is a new phenomenon, and is by its very nature a transitional phase. And I'm not sure when it ends. But when I was doing my research about the UK, we have a whole, the generation above mine, the baby boomer generation that kind of invented teenagers, or they say that, they invented rock and roll and all that stuff. They've taken it, self-avowedly taken it with them into old age. They've still got all the fun, and we have, we seriously in our country are waging war against the young, an economic war against the young. You can't go to university now without racking up like fortunes of debt. You can't afford to live in the places where there are jobs because the houses are too, the middle and the older generations are still holding on to all of the pie. And then we say, young people, what are young people doing with their lives? Well, what can they do with their lives? What opportunities are we giving them to do anything meaningful? Because we still think that we can run the show and have all the fun. It's not fair, is it? But anyway, thank you. I'm going to look him up. I'm in an extended period of adolescence. Yeah, I am. But I think that's a good thing. Because it's about not being stuck in your ways. It's about constantly learning and changing and being really good fun on a night out.
I thought, which one of you are writing for young adults? 250 years ago, you wouldn't be here.
No, it's true, and actually, we're going to have a conversation about this later, aren't we? But I was really suspicious about YA marketing to begin with. That whole idea that was a concept. I was just like, well, when I was a teenager, I just went into a bookshop and picked up a book I liked the look of, and if the first page got me, I read the book. And I certainly would have gone, oh, what? That's the teen section. I'm not reading that. Like, don't tell me what to read. I would have been like that. So anyway, that's for another conversation later. To those of you who write for children, younger children, feel that this is feel that this is in any way relevant to your lives. Does it make sense to you, those of you who write or illustrate for younger children? Is it kind of, do you feel that what we're talking about is touching on the people that you're working for too? Yeah. Oh, thank God. Otherwise there were like 4 people in the room who were interested in what we were talking about. And when you have contact with those children, it's different, right? If you go do schools visits, or if you're a librarian working with young children, their response to fiction is different, or their response to your work is different.
Different from what?
From older kids or from adults.
Oh, okay.
It's more just like unabridged joy at your presence, you lucky people.
It's not done to say for an adult that you love books. My daughter,
It's not done.
Yeah,
no, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, because my daughter is a reading animal. I'm not, so that's her rebellion.
Okay, yeah, so that was the answer. If we wanted our kids to like books, we should have all pretended not to read, ever.
Works very well. Reads for 2 months, the whole vacation is reading, and
Do you want to swap with one of mine?
Maybe. There is life outside. Join it.
No, but don't say that, because there's life in there too.
Also.
There's loads of life in there.
She can read for 2 months, it's alright.
Yeah. My dad said to me once, what do you get out of all this reading? And I was like, ton of vicarious experience. And my mum was sitting in the back of the car and she was like, good answer, Jen.
But at school, she's really well-bred in reading. But it's in school, she had to say, what's your super talent? And I said, reading. I'm not gonna tell that.
Well, because it's not cool.
No.
Yeah, but it's super cool though.
High school. No.
You know you can, you just have to be better at the well-bragged game to do it. And I seriously urge you, play that with all of the kids that you work with, because it works miracles. It just aren't brought up to be, people think that saying that knowing you're good at something is arrogant, but it's not. That saying you're good at something is arrogant, but it's not. Like, what's so interesting about saying you're rubbish at maths? It's not that interesting. I mean, I am quite rubbish at maths, but anyway. But why is it cool to be failing at something? I know, but it's not. But that is not the all-pervasive teenage culture. That's not it. It's our understanding. It's what we see. But that's not it. It's much more subtle and much more complex than that. It's not cool to try. It's not cool to be good at. It's cool to be good at stuff. You just got to carry it well. I believe that.
How do you continue after this game with asking and telling what you're good at? You do this with these kids?
Yeah, we do it with kids.
And then after that?
Oh, we do some other thing.
Yeah.
Well, we do some creative writing, or we do some. The conversations that I've been having in South America were much more about politics and religion and gender, identity politics, actually. Gender was massive. And honestly, the most extraordinary conversations with teenagers in Peru Peru's very traditional, very conservative, very Catholic. And these kids are so homophobic, and they so don't want to be homophobic, but they don't know how to please family, authority, church, and then the modern world, or the world that they see. It's such a struggle. It was heartbreaking, actually. And after this, it was a 2-hour conversation. And after the 2-hour conversation, the teacher said to me, I've been teaching these kids for 4 years and I didn't know they thought this about all of this stuff. Because they haven't had the conversation. That's it. Because there's no time or something. I don't know what it is. But yeah, it's an icebreaker, right? Well bragged. You can do anything after you've confessed to someone that you're really good at dancing. It works really well. And also watch what I say, because boys get it like that. Boys actually say they're good at stuff they're not even good at.
I'm gonna try it out.
Yeah, do. It works a treat. It's really good.
What do you do with all the information that you get from the...
I don't know yet. Well, I wrote a play for the British Council in Peru and Brazil, and that was based on the conversations I'd had in those two countries. I wrote a play as part of this audience development program to get young people into the theatre, to try to help young people understand that the theatre is also for them. And that was at the National Theatre in Lima in August, and it's going on tour. And in Brazil, it's part of a different festival. So I've used it for that. I was supposed to be able to come up with some kind of, swanky piece of something that the Hay Festival could then say this fellowship created this, but I didn't do that. Because the information is mine now, and the growth of understanding of young people, which just like the fashion industry, I don't pretend to know some secret about young people, because it changes like that, right? One minute you think flares are in, the next you just look stupid at the disco. But it was a year of learning, which is not going to hurt. It's been amazing. So it will come. Bits of it are in the book somehow or another. Things come out in oblique ways. But I'm not an academic and I'm not organised, so I'm not going to be able to write some amazing piece of research about teenagers. By the time I did it, the teenagers in question would be like 85 anyway.
That's not about us. No.
But I would say that speaks to a different picture of exactly culture, what your particular peer culture is, and your own level of self-esteem, actually, you know, and yeah, I don't think it's about reading itself.
No.
I think it's about the environment that you're allowed to speak in. I mean, and if there's something that you really love and you don't want to admit it because people will laugh at you, that's not about the thing you're doing or about you, is it? It's about the place that you're in.
She writes marvelous things. And there's a contest in school, writing contest. She don't want to write for that because maybe she could win. And then everybody knows she was writing.
Oh, she's a true writer then, because she just wants to be invisible. That's fine. She's going to be fine. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm a writer, but I'm not going to tell anyone. That's perfect. She's going to go far.
But actually, it was the same when I grew up. I both drawn and were writing stories, but it was much cooler being a good drawer. I mean, people were, oh, you're drawing a perfect Donald Duck, you know, when you were 9 and 10, can you draw that? And that was cool. But the writing I did secretly at home, and I didn't really want somebody to know that I was good at writing. It was between me and the teacher.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because being good at drawing is like an instant miracle. It's like a card trick, right?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, you just made that. Amazing. And also, I'm not like, far be it from me to cast aspersions on all the amazing teenage writers out there, but if anyone saw the stuff that I wrote when I was a teenager, I would curl up and die. So, you know, maybe there's another reason why you keep it to yourself, because it's actually super personal, and you look back on it later and go, oh my God, just shush.
But isn't that also like, just like reading and writing, it's more like a solo journey. You do it by yourself. And I felt like many times when I read something, I don't often talk to other people about what I've read. But if I watch a movie or a TV show, I'm like, oh, have you seen this thing? And I want to talk to them about it. And like with drawing, I want to show people. But reading, it's always been like, I think for many people, you do it by yourself.
Yeah, well, it's like I said at the beginning, that story, that silly story I told you about the key, we all had our own different one, which is maybe why you don't need to speak to everyone about it, because you don't have the same story in your head.
Yeah, and that can also be why we think that maybe people don't read today, because we don't talk about it. You just do it by yourself.
Well, in the UK, definitely, adults reading fiction is down quite a lot. 8%. But that's just one survey in the UK, and you know, I don't know. But yeah, you might be right. We might all be keeping a secret.
It doesn't have to be that way. I'm from a really small town. It's about 8,000 people, and there's been like a lot of authors, a lot of writers coming from there, and I think it's sort of integrated in the culture there that nobody is ashamed of writing. And a lot of people, like, I mean, that was our way of playing when we were kids. I was writing with my friends. We made like fake newspapers and stuff like that just for ourselves. It was really funny.
Just like now.
Yeah. You're right. No, but I mean, I didn't have that thing that I've been ashamed of reading or writing, because it wasn't like part of the culture that you should be ashamed of it. And a lot of people who were writing never started to work with it, but it was still nothing to be ashamed of. It was just something that you could do, just like playing the piano.
It sounds like a surreal joke, the concept that reading or writing would be something to be ashamed of. It's like it's a new dystopian novel. Who wants that? I won't write that. Someone else can have it. But you know, it's ridiculous that it would be something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, but still, it seems that way. But it's
yeah, but as I said, it's more about being. That's just more about being. Finding your way in the world generally. It's more, and shame is a very strong word. It's not like that. It's just. It's more a testament to being a certain age and not being sure about how to assert yourself yet. That's, I think. And it could be that your daughter was really, really good at BMX biking, but she wouldn't want to tell people that she was good at it, but just because she doesn't want to tell people she's good at something. Maybe.
You have to play the brag game with her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's like works miracles. Joko, do you want us to stop? Is it Finca?
No, I just thought, young people now, I have 3 teenagers, it's the middle one, so I know a lot about them. And what I notice when they come home from school, the way of how much success they have and how good they look and how clever they are, it's really important.
Of course.
They want to be best, and when you start writing, you can't show an accomplishment like, look what I've accomplished, only when you have peers writing too. But it's nothing to brag about when you're 14, 15, 16 in a lot of places.
Well, because it's one of the skills that gets better through practice, like most skills. Is that what you mean?
And then they have a published book, and then, whoa,
Yeah.
you're a real writer. Yes, I was a writer since I was like 6, but you didn't notice. So I think it's the difference between wanting to show you're successful and being scared to.
And you see, I would make the point that does not differentiate teenagers from anyone else. I feel the same. Like, do we all not want to kind of, feel good about ourselves and feel successful in whatever way? I don't want to go outside looking like a complete nightmare. I don't want people not to like me. I don't want to do something that's not good. And it's the same. We come home from work carrying that same baggage with us, don't we?
Yes.
All the time.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a Dutch writer, but I live on the border of Belgium, so I come in Dutch schools and in Belgian schools a lot, and there is a cultural difference in how Dutch children react to writing and reading and Flemish children. I find that if I ask in a Dutch classroom who's writing here, like half the class raises their fingers. If I ask the same question in a Flemish classroom, children look at each other and go like, okay, I do that. They're more timid. I think it could be a cultural difference. And maybe when I was a child, I've been writing stories ever since I was 6. And I even published my own book when I was 10. Well, of course, there was like 1 copy. And I gave
See what you did there? You well bragged and then you took it all back.
I drew the pictures myself, and I wrote it all by hand because we didn't own a typewriter at the time. And I gave it as a present to my neighbor, the daughter of our neighbor. She was 4. She couldn't read, so I could read my own stories to her. And she always kept the book, and she gave it back to me after I published my first real book. And I still have it, and I take it to schools, and I show the children the little notebook that I wrote with the pictures in it when I was 10. And sometimes I read a piece of a story, and they all go like, "This is nice, this is great." So that if you do this, and I ask children who's writing, and they raise their hands and said, hang on to those stories, because one day you might be in the position of telling children, look at me, I'm other children, how you started. And I was not afraid of to admit that I was writing. I was, on the contrary, I think the local newspaper got fed up with me because I kept sending my stories to them. I think it might be culture, but it's also your personality, I think.
Yeah.
And if you're good at something, then you want to show it to the world. At least that's what I wanted to do. And I'm not sure if my stories back then were really good, but I think they were actually for a 10-year-old.
I think that's wonderful.
But I show it to children now, and they are really surprised. I'm like, wow, you did that when you were our age. Yes, and you can do it too. So I hope to give them some confidence
in showing their ability to write and to make up stories.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure that works. That's really lovely. I can't believe she kept it. How amazing.
Yeah, it was
and also, I think the reason you said other children is because your inner 10-year-old is just having such a ball when you're doing that.
But I'm probably still a 10-year-old in my head. Yoga can talk about that. She knows me.
And you write for 10-year-olds?
I write for...
Because I've had this conversation before. Lots of children's writers say to me, you know, this is my kind of emotional age and these are the kids that I write for because this is the time of childhood that I remember so clearly. And I remember like 15, 16, like it was yesterday.
Well, my children always tell me I have the humor of a 6-year-old. So I guess that's kind of true, yeah.
I'm Flemish, but I used to live in Belgium. So I used to live in Holland when I was 12 years old. That's like, I don't want to even try to think how many years that's ago, but I came from a small village in Belgium, and the school system, the academic level, or whatever, is very traditional, very up to accomplishing, can't find the words yet, but it's
more like academic.
Academic,
okay.
Yeah. And in Holland, it was like light years beyond. We indeed had to write poems. The first thing that really shocked me was when I was the first day at school and we came in and we said, like, yeah, we were sitting out and we had to talk about our weekend. And I was like, I'm able to speak. I have to tell something personal. I was like, whoa. And then, but now, of course, the schools in Belgium have changed as well, but slowly, much slowly. So I think, yeah, I can understand that they are really proud in writing because we had to write poems and illustrate them. So, and we had theater, and that was not even possible.
It's a really interesting point because you're saying that the Dutch children are pleased to admit they do it because it's valued in their school culture.
Yeah.
And in the UK, I mean, this change can move this way and then it can go back again like a goddamn tide. Because in the UK now, there is no time for creative writing, there is no time for art, there is no time for theatre, drama, there's no time for music, and therefore the establishment is saying they do not value it. And then that means that as writers and librarians and illustrators and authors, we have a massive role to go in and inspire children, that it's really important, that it's a huge part of your own self-expression but also your culture. And I think that's probably where some of the difference comes in.
Yeah, we are a bit more timid than, you know, Dutch people are more
timid with self-expression. English people aren't timid at all, we're just like, you know.
Yeah. You're all talking.
It's a minute. We have a minute. Don't all stare at me for a minute because I'll just cry. Oh,
I have a message.
Did you hear that? That was so mean. That was so mean. I'm not even going to repeat that. But do you want to say anything? Because you can so say no.
I can say something.
Okay. Teenager in the spotlight, people. It will work.
I'm and I'm now 13, and I write my first book when I was 10, and it is published by Royal Publisher.
Traditional publisher.
Well bragged.
She's not finished.
No, I know. I was just interrupting.
Now you have to talk about book 2 and book 3 too. Yes. Or I do it.
Well, and you don't like to talk about it. You're shy.
See, everyone is talking for Leanne right now.
Yeah. And I don't know what to say.
Is it a trilogy?
You were in a Dutch school. Tell about the school.
Well, Dutch schools are all like my school, but I have a really nice creative school. We have we can
Different subjects?
subjects, and we have also woods, carving and metal made things.
Mhm.
We have like 3 weeks, and then we have to make a little book of what we learn that 3 weeks.
Mhm.
And you all write it with your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice book.
What's your book about?
I write about animals, and this is my third book. And it's about a tiger. His name is Ben.
Nice cover.
Thank you.
For what age?
Yeah. Elementary school.
What's that, primary school?
Yeah.
Do you write poetry as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
little ones that are the stories that the tiger tells to his little brother.
God, well done, amazing.
Thank you. And it's cool to say the writing.
Yeah.
People must think you're cool. Your classmates must think that's pretty cool. You have a book. They must.
Yeah, but I think
3 books.
I don't like it when they talk about it and they say, yeah, that's nice, and yeah.
Is your illustrator a teenager too?
No, she's, I don't know how old she is.
She's old. She's just old. She's really good though, isn't she? It's lovely.
Yeah. The first 2 books I illustrated myself, so
Really?
those are not really so beautiful like this. I mean, yeah.
Well, thank you for saying that, because oh, sorry.
Maybe to
You ask, Leanne.
Can you read a little poem from the book in your own language that we hear? What you just
Okay.
read it aloud, a little poem.
Swedish.
Yeah.
In Swedish, of course, yeah.
Dutch.
Oh, it's Dutch.
Is she
Oh,
Dutch?
is she Dutch? Ah.
Oh, well, in Dutch, that's
Even better.
Oh ja, nog leuker. Nog leuker.
Okay. Er was eens een vogel, die vond zichzelf mooier dan mooi. Hij had vele kleuren, rood, geel en groen. En hij droeg een fraaie verentooi. Hij vond zichzelf zo'n kampioen. Op een dag zag hij een vrouwtje, wat hij graag versieren wilde. Maar verwaand trok ze haar snavel op. Bewijs je liefde maar, is wat ze gilde. Breng me de snorhaar van een tijgerkop. De mooie vogel was gekwetst, maar liefde maakte hem sprakeloos. Hij wilde alles voor haar doen, dus probeerde snel en roekeloos aan haar eisen te voldoen. De vogel zag de tijger gaan, streek neer en sprak. Heer tijger, alstublieft, één haar. Hij vloog al op van zijn tak en dacht niet meer aan het gevaar. Bijna had onze vogel een haar te pakken, toen de tijger begon met happen. De vogel probeerde nog te trappen en snel met zijn vleugeltjes te klappen, maar kon niet meer aan de bek ontsnappen. Voordat de tijger hem verslond, zei het grote dier: vergeet niet, vriend, al ben je nog zo mooi en zing je nog zo'n prachtig lied, je bent en blijft mijn prooi.
You know what? We could not have predicted a better ending to the first lecture of this than that. So thank you so much. That was amazing. Like you're now our like great new hope. You've like embodied everything we've discussed. Protagonism, young people writing and reading. Well done, nice one. Thank you. Like rounded that up so nicely. Right, let's drink coffee. Please, can we drink coffee?
Thank you very, very, very much,
My
Jen.
pleasure. My pleasure.
all the people having questions for Jenny. She will have me coffee here.